Welcome into NFL Daily. I am Tom Downey once again. We're going to look at where the Carolina Panthers head coaching search sits as that process moves along. We like to do the head coach lists, the rankings, hot boards, whatever buzzwords you want to use, at least twice. Once when the coach first gets fired, and then again as the process goes on. Background on this job, in case you guys forgot and or aren't Panthers fans. Panthers canned Matt Rule mid-season. Interim head coach Steve Wilks almost made the playoffs. It was a bit of a surprise in a positive way how successful Carolina was down the stretch this year despite constant quarterback shuffling. The real question I have with this team beyond what happens at quarterback is who ends up making this hire. Is it GM Scott Fitterer and or is it owner David Tepper? Does the GM get to make the final decision? Is the head coach going to report to GM or owner? Because GM was there for Matt Rule the entire time, and then head coach gets fired. Sometimes you see GM's there for a year, then he gets fired, leads to organizational instability. That's a big thing I think the coaches involved want to figure out as well. Before we break down the known interviews for Carolina and my current top 10 coach rankings for this job, if you want more NFL head coach updates from not just Carolina, but the other 4 jobs open, maybe the Chargers join them soon. That would certainly make sense. Type in me in the comment section if you guys want more NFL head coach updates, regardless of which team it is. Get those me's for me. Yeah, that makes sense too, in the comments. Before we get to my updated top 10 ordering, the top 10 coaches I picked were very easy because 10 of them have been either requested, interviews scheduled, whatever. Steve Wilks, Jim Caldwell, Shane Steichen, and Frank Reich have all already interviewed for this job. Now, reminder on what the Rooney Rule is. At minimum, 2 outside minority candidates must be interviewed before a head coach can be hired. Only one of those so far for Carolina in Jim Caldwell. Hopefully, the other interview requests are not just to fulfill that because that defeats the whole purpose of having it, right? Other names, Ben Johnson. I'm probably going to mispronounce it, so yell at me, Petey. Ejiro, Evero? It's not Evero, Evero. Ejiro Evero. Thank you, Petey. That's our Broncos host there. The Broncos DC, Mike Kafka, Ken Dorsey, Kellen Moore as well. A very common theme for what this Panthers coaching search is looking for right now. Offensive minds, ideally young offensive minds and play callers. That certainly makes sense given the massive uncertainty at the quarterback position right now for the Carolina Panthers. So prediction time. We'll make this the pinned comment, by the way, on today's show. Who will the Panthers end up hiring as their coach? Not who you want. Who will they end up landing to replace Matt Rule / Steve Wilks? Get those predictions in for me at the pinned comments on today's video. You know the drill, right? Ad break comes on YouTube. Whatever. Let the ad play. Head down to the pinned comment and get your votes. And maybe check out on who other people have as well at that pinned comment. All right, the new hot board then. Number 10, Ejiro Evero. I don't think Carolina is the most logical fit for him. I think he's got a better shot at the Denver job to an extent. I think they're going to go high-end, big fish. So that'd be like their plan C or plan D. I think he'll be the Broncos DC again this time next year, and he'll be a very hot candidate then. In general, you don't see as many defensive minds really in the market. D'Amico Ryans will be one of them. He does not want to interview for the Panthers job. He's going to look elsewhere, so cross him off your list. Number 9 is Kellen Moore, the Cowboys' embattled offensive coordinator. When things are on, things look great in Dallas. And when they're bad, it's just like they shoot themselves in the foot repeatedly. Sometimes there's creativity for creativity's sake, although an offense that's averaged 30 points per game the last 3 years when the quarterback is healthy is pretty good. That there's a lack of consistency that NFL teams and players and coaches just despise. There are 5 open jobs right now in the NFL head coaching carousel. Where does this Panthers job rank? I think it's a very narrow gap between 1 to 5. I think you talk into any of the 5 spots. So get those votes in. Where does the Panthers job rank? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Number 8, again, the theme, young offensive minds. Mike Kafka, the former Chiefs quarterbacks coach, now the Giants offensive coordinator. Coaches in the playoffs can't interview until next week, so that's why it's only a requested interview at this point. I think Kafka isn't quite ready for a head coaching gig, but definitely someone you bring in for an interview and see where he's at, just in case, knock on wood, you're searching for a head coach again in another 2 or 3 years. Let's go to a veteran offensive mind. That is Jim Caldwell, who pretty consistently gets NFL head coaching interviews, has not been a head coach, though, for several years, but he's got the experience that a lot of the names on this list simply do not have. He was the Colts head coach for 3 years, then Manning gets hurt, it's a disaster, and he gets fired. Kind of not his fault. The Lions are only just now getting back to the heights that Caldwell once led them to. I think he kind of got thrown to the stick, but I got it. They were overachieving. They wanted to rebuild, but they wanted their own guys in there. It didn't work out very well. Above 500 is pretty good for 7 years as an NFL head coach. Caldwell said he only wants to be a head coach. I think he could get a quarterback's coach job again. I don't know if he'll get a head coaching job, however. Today's show is made possible by our sportsbook partner, BetUS, chatsports.com/bet, promo code NFL Daily. I've been doing parlays on the playoffs. I was throwing live bets on the Buffalo Bills, knock on wood, and you can bet on a bunch of props they have as well, including, but not limited to, the Panthers head coaching job. Steve Wilks, as of filming, the betting favorite, Shane Steichen, Ben Johnson, Jim Caldwell, Ken Dorsey. We'll get to those top 3 names in a little bit. Teaser, they are the top 3 I have, not in that order. Let's move to number 6, who was number 5 on the odds. Ken Dorsey, the Bills offensive coordinator. Only 1 year as the OC. He took over for Brian Daboll. Now, of course, the Giants' wildly successful head coach, at least through one season, with Kafka as his OC. I like Dorsey a lot. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him, but much like Kafka, I think that's too big of a jump too quick for Dorsey. Number 5, and there are some organizational ties here for Frank Reich. He is number 5 on a list of former Indianapolis Colts head coach. I would argue got the short end of the stick, the scapegoat, if you will, as the Colts head coach, because it seemed like ownership wanted to see Sam Ehlinger, and then Sam Ehlinger didn't go well, and then they fire him, then they allow Matt Ryan to come back in, then Foles' chance. It was just a disaster in Indy. A lot of resets needed. I think Frank Reich's a good coach, though. If you want stability for your organization, I do think Reich would be a fantastic fit in Carolina or elsewhere. As NFL news happens, we have you guys covered. All the latest on the NFL right here. Hit that sub button, youtube.com/@chatsports today. Free videos multiple times per day when you subscribe. Number 4, Sean Payton. This, of course, was the big news of the day. The Panthers, in a bit of a late process, have requested an interview with Sean Payton for their open head coaching job. I would wager to say that there would have been some type of informal communication, whether it's Panthers Saints or Panthers Payton, of whether or not there would be interest on both sides for this potential job. Reminder, the Saints have the contractual rights to Sean Payton, and they would allegedly are going to request a first-round pick for him. Doesn't mean they'll get that. That's what they're going to ask for. And I think Payton would probably go, there's one job I want. I'm not going elsewhere. We'll figure out the compensation then. So Sean Payton does not have to return. He likely wants a good situation, big money, big control, stability. I'm not sure Carolina is that. And remember, they're an intra-division opponent. And I have a tough time seeing Carolina or Saints saying, yeah, you know what, Sean, go to Carolina. We'll take the first-round pick and let you coach against us twice a year for the next 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is. That might not be the best fit. That's why I'm surprised the timing of this news not coming down until Sunday that Payton is going to interview with Carolina, at least requested to interview with Carolina. I'm unconvinced in the end Payton takes a job. I don't love any of these 5 jobs. Maybe the Chargers one comes open, and that's the favorite for me. So will Sean Payton take a head coaching job this year? Y for yes, N for no. Get those votes in for me in the comment section. Number 3, interim head coach Steve Wilks. I was very impressed by what Steve Wilks did. Those players bought in. They had success. I think at minimum he should have a lot of defensive coordinator interest. And this time next year, if the DC job goes well again, he should have more head coaching interest. He had a rough go in Arizona. I think he's on his, I call it the Dennis Allen career path of getting a second shot after being a DC who got fired. Not too many of those guys get a second shot. It's mostly offensive guys. Hopefully it would go better at take 2 for Steve Wilks than what season 1 for Dennis Allen was. Number 2, Ben Johnson. Maybe you saw some of the reports on Sunday that, David Tepper likes Ben Johnson. I'm inclined to believe that. I also think there's somebody else who might make a little bit more sense for this job with just the timing and stability. I was very impressed, like I think many of us were, with what Ben Johnson did this year as the Lions offensive coordinator. it's a pretty quick ascent for Ben Johnson. 2012 to 2017, various assistant roles, receiver, tight end, assistant receivers. 2018 was the Dolphins wide receivers coach, quality control coach in 2019, which is like, we like you on staff, we're going to have a role for you, promote you next year. That's what they did. Tight ends coach for 2 years. Then 2022, he took over as the full-time offensive coordinator. That's a quick turnaround for Ben Johnson, but this is the new hot young offensive name in the NFL. I'm going to stick with my gut, though, despite what the report saying that David Tepper wants Ben Johnson, who, by the way, has not interviewed yet. So I find it the owner loves him, who's never talked with him. Okay. Number one, though, for me is Shane Steichen, the Eagles offensive coordinator. I like a lot of what Shane Steichen has done, not just, by the way, in Philadelphia, but back with his time as the Colts offensive coordinator. So I'm going to put my money down on Shane Steichen. I think one of those top 3 names, also good, Steve Wilks, Ben Johnson. Hey, we did our head coach candidate video. I rode with Shane Steichen. There's no reason to change that here. Maybe Ben Johnson wows in his interview. Maybe Steve Wilks does too, or they go in a shocking direction. But that is the latest on the Panthers head coaching search.